Yesterday, January 22nd, there were some big changes to immigration that will affect a lot of people who are either in Canada or who are planning to come to Canada in 2024 and beyond as international students. These are changes that have been going on since like early December when they've announced the increase in proof of funds for students. And yesterday they announced that one, there's going to be an international student cap. So it will be capped at 364,000 people for the year of 2024. And that's a 35% reduction in the overall intake that they used to do. Right now, there are 900,000 supposedly active study permits in Canada. And now in 2024, they're only willing to add 364,000 people to that. Two, private colleges will no longer be able to qualify you for a program that will get you a post-graduation work permit. Big deal for a lot of people who were going to private colleges, privately funded colleges, studying PSW programs, whatever the case may be. No more for these private colleges. And number three is the biggest change that I never even thought of that would happen, is that spouses of international students who used to be able to come on a work permit, an open work permit, is no longer possible for regular programs. Unless you're doing a master's or a doctorate, this will not be eligible anymore. And this will change plans for families, for individuals, for people who are trying to come to school. A lot of people will be affected by these changes.
It's a loophole that makes people think they're going to be able to stay, and then they end up having to leave.
Now, we are going to talk about a little bit about the narrative that you know, Jet, personally with these private colleges. One thing that the minister said is that some of these international schools, and it has been the narrative over the last several years, that immigration through school is a pathway to permanent residency, and it is not a direct pathway to permanent residency. I was sold that. You were probably sold that, Jet. And when I came here, I kind of had to figure it out. There was no straight line. There was no direct to permanent residency, and there still isn't a direct to permanent residency, right? So now a lot of colleges have been selling people on education, come to Canada. They've been getting subpar quality education for the people who care about education anyway. There's a lot of us who came here, not us, I want to say us. I cared about the education, but I didn't come here for education. Okay. But I did end up studying something that was good, that I liked, that added to my value, but I wasn't in line to go to school. And a lot of immigrants are, but it doesn't mean that we should get subpar education, right? So you know of a lot of people who are going to these private colleges who are getting subpar education, paying premium dollar, that Mark Miller pointed out yesterday. So talk a little bit about the ones that you do know, and then we're going to pivot into like, here are all these changes, guys. From everything that we've talked about, how do we bring it all together and help you to respond to these changes on an individual level? Private education.
Yes. So, I can go on and on about private education because there are a lot of issues with the private university. So the difference is it a publicly funded university where the government is involved, or is it a private institution? And these are private for-profit institutions where I find the focus with immigration pathways, the initial intention for them, for these universities, was to bring in highly skilled workers into the Canadian workforce and help to educate these workers. But what's been happening is they've created very low quality programs that do not prepare people to work in Canada. And they charge high amounts for them, and they actively recruit people from outside of Canada and say, if you fulfill this program, you'll be able to get a post-graduation work permit and be able to stay in Canada. And they're selling immigration. But their actual program outcomes, a lot of people are graduating from these programs and getting minimum wage survival jobs and not being able to survive. And if you spent like 30 to $90,000 on a program, on an MBA, you want to be able to not only survive, but thrive, pay bills, support a family. And as you said, the spousal work permits are gone now. So a lot of people would be coming into these countries, into Canada, through the international student path. and they would have their spouse get like a full-time work permit. Their spouse would work, like whoever has the lowest income earning potential would usually go to school. The
Yeah.
higher earning income potential spouse or partner would work, and they would bring in the money, and it's just a pathway to bring people and families into the country.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is that some of these for-profit schools, and I've spoken with both people who've worked at these schools and the students who went through the programs, or who've been recruited. Like I had a friend in Mexico recently who had a school in BC reach out to him and try and recruit him in Mexico, and had an admissions officer speak with him, and they were like, we can give you $5,000 off of your education, or but you have to pay us $5,000 to submit your student visa applications.
That sounds
Um,
scammy. I don't know.
but they also initially tried to recruit him to come and do a degree program in customer service.
A degree program in customer service. We should
So
replay that a couple of times. Does that make a degree program in customer service? Okay.
yes, so customer service in general is a minimum wage job. A lot of people who work in the customer service and retail are like high school graduates or people who graduated from university but did not know how to sell themselves, and it's kind of like this disappointing fallback career for people who've graduated from university, because you don't want to pay for university but then do the same job as people who graduated from high school,
Yeah,
and it's considered like a survival job.
exactly. That's what I was
And
gonna say. Mm-hmm.
this friend went, instead of doing customer service, he studied an MBA at this same institution. And he talked about the fact that the things that he was learning in his MBA weren't really preparing him to find a job. And in one of the classes, the professor talked about statistics and outcomes for graduates from the school. And he said, our graduates are not landing high paying jobs. A lot of them are getting minimum wage or low paying jobs, like under 50,000. And this was in Vancouver, where the average one bedroom apartment, I think right now, I had a brother that has moved to Canada since I had moved, and he got an apartment in November, so 3 months ago, and it was $2,600. So if you're making like 50,000, right? You and you're the one bedroom apartment that you want to live in, if you want to be able to afford to live on your own, is 2,600. You're talking about you spending, what is that, like 30 something thousand dollars on rent, and then you have to pay taxes at 50,000. You're looking at least $10,000 in taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So where's your money for food, for clothes, for a family, for all the other things?
Yep.
um it's just that, the math isn't mathing, the numbers
Math
aren't
is
enough.
not mathing.
Yes. So a lot of these schools were bringing people in and telling them these narratives around, you'll be able to immigrate to Canada. But
Mm-hmm.
the truth is, as you said, being an international student does not guarantee you a path to immigration. And you were the one who, like, I knew that in my soul, through all of my experiences of speaking with people who have had to leave the country because they didn't meet Canadian immigration requirements. And the thing is, these schools will bring you in and they'll only talk about immigration in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
when they're getting your money. And then after that, they don't talk to you about what are the requirements to meet immigration and stay in Canada. They don't mention it ever again in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
So you then graduate, and like I was talking to him and I said, do you know what national occupational classification you're applying for or trying to get your PR through? And he's like, what's NOC? What's this national occupational classification? I was like, how on earth are you trying to get a PR and you don't even know like the basic thing of like what makes you qualified to stay in Canada? And it's like had him so poorly prepared to stay in the country. And this is not uncommon. And so these schools will come, they will give you a low quality of education that doesn't prepare you for jobs. They don't show you how to understand the Canadian labor market. They don't show you how to solve problems that people care about. They don't show you how to understand immigration. And you were literally not taught to survive. And it feels like a scam because
Mm-hmm.
they took your money
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the federal government is addressing. They're
Yeah.
like, this needs to stop
Mm-hmm.
now. And
Mm-hmm.
they said they didn't give the provinces time to figure it out. They
Mm-hmm.
said, you private institutions are no longer allowed to operate and do this. We are taking the right for people to get post-graduation work permits and this path to stay in Canada from your institutions because you have mishandled it so poorly.
Mm-hmm. And it has been a
And
loophole. Mm-hmm.
it has been, it's been a loophole that, because loopholes, I think for a lot of people think it's a loophole to get into the country. It's a loophole that makes people think they're going to be able to stay,
Yeah.
and then they end up having to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And more people than not end up having to leave or end up struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you take on top of that the fact that in previous, like up until recently, they said you only needed $10,000 to survive in Canada per year, whereas if you went to any of a lot of these private institutions are in expensive cities that where the average one bedroom rent is like 2,600, 2,500 right now, as somebody who's new and moving into the country. And even to just get a room like in an apartment or in a house, you're talking about $1,000 to $1,500
Yep.
before you pay for any food, before
Mm-hmm.
you pay for clothes, before you get your books, before you get any of those other expenses. So $10,000 was a joke. So people were coming to Canada thinking that they'd be able to survive on $10,000 because that's what they needed to show the government that they had. And then they thought that they were going to be able to stay in Canada, only to realize that these schools were so poorly preparing them. And then you had like immigration consultancy in itself can have so many flaws. Like people, I know this is a story that I've heard from people, again, who are coming from like overpopulated, or I shouldn't say highly populated places, like where you have, I speak to people who are from India often who tell me, like, I had this immigration consultant trick me or screw me, or they took my money and then wasn't able to get into the country, and they pay so much money, $15,000 and then they don't get the status because they're selling the dream
Yeah.
of a life in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And it's become the equivalent of the American dream, the
Mm-hmm.
welcoming country of Canada, who will bring you in and who will give you this career path. And all you have to do is go to school, and education is the path to success.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way that it's panning out. And then
Yeah.
people feel scrambled. They go and they get their survival job. And then 10 years later, they're still there.
Mm-hmm.
10 years
And they're
later,
not living the dream, right?
uh,
Because that's not the idea. The dream isn't the survival job. That's what we want to get
yes.
out of. That's not the dream, guys. And you've been talking a lot about like, okay, work experience, selling yourself, even in your own experience in Canada and dealing with the challenges that you face as an immigrant. If you had to tell me three top lessons learned from your experience that you can impart onto current or future immigrants, what would those three top lessons learned be?
Okay, the first one would definitely be like, stop writing a resume as a history of tasks and responsibilities, and stop just focusing on a job by saying I need any and everything. Like
Mhm,
that type of job search approach, like I need any job to make money, is going to keep you unemployed and broke longer.
mhm.
And shift to saying this is how I can help your organization, and take an entrepreneurial mindset to making money. And I've talked about how to do that in our previous episodes.
Mhm.
That's the number one shift.
Number one. Okay.
The second shift is allow yourself to dream
Mm,
and build out a plan for that dream.
mm,
Because so many people say, I will achieve this one day. One
mhm,
day I will get out of that survival
mhm,
job. And then
mhm,
8 to 10 years passes. And that
mhm,
is not an uncommon story. So
mhm,
instead of saying that will be one day,
mhm,
allow that to be now and build out a plan for that to happen now. Because so many times we think we need to take a step back or take a step down. And the truth is, if we had the right tools and resources around understanding the Canadian labor market and selling ourselves, we'd be able to access the job that we want now.
mhm.
The third thing is, a lot of people think that they have to stay in the same job or in the same company. Because culturally, in different parts of the world,
Yes, yes. You work until you retire in the same company. It's a big deal if you work here for 15 years, whereas now, like, 15 years, what?
career jumpers, people who jump companies every 2 years or so, make more money.
Yeah.
They tend to make, statistics show they tend to make at least 12% more. than
Mhm.
people who stay at the same company. Because it's like we talked about in our previous episode, when you have set a certain precedent for how that company sees you, how they value you, it's different. And when you get the chance to set a new precedent for how you are valued every 2 years, you set it higher and higher every time.
Yep. Yep. And I've seen that in the construction industry. One day I'm talking to this guy, he has this email address. Then in a year, I'm like, you're moved over to where? Like, and then because if you move sideways, it's you make more money than trying to move up into one country, one company. Company.
Absolutely. And then once you move sideways within that company will often give you a chance for a promotion
Uh-huh.
because they've already see you as somebody who earns more. And then they'll give you a chance for a promotion. And then you take that promotion, you hop to another company and you know how to sell yourself differently. And you're bringing in new knowledge that's external. And so then you take another promotion. And so most of the clients that I work with tend to get promotions every 18 to 36 months.
Yes.
And some clients like double their most of my clients double their salary within either 6 months to 3 years.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So, and that's huge. I had one client, he was making 40,000. We worked together. His first interview was for 120,000. He just
Uh-huh.
shifted how he sold himself.
Uh-huh.
So the return on investment isn't just now, it's your lifetime salary. It's not just your next promotion.
Yeah.
You'll learn how to sell yourself for the rest of your life.
Uh-huh.
You will be able to afford a better life in a new country. You'll be able to afford to help your family more. You'll move out of living paycheck to paycheck. You'll avoid this idea of middle class poverty or not being able to afford a home, because that's a whole other ballgame. Affording a home in like an expensive city in Canada is, you're talking about millions of dollars.
Uh-huh.
If you're going to live within the city, even if you go on the outskirts now, the housing on the outskirts is very expensive.
It's getting there. Yep.
It's getting there,
Uh-huh.
unless you want to like commute 3 hours or more. And that's when we talk about the ideas of getting into remote work and how do you design your work to fit your life.
Uh-huh.
And when you only have, unless they change it, because they're changing the laws quickly. I love the fact, like I get that it sucks that the federal government is cracking down, but they're cracking down to decrease the lies.
Yes. It's necessary. It's drastic but necessary. Uh-huh.
Yes. And when you only have a limited amount of time on a post-graduation work permit to find a job that meets a certain national occupational classification so that you can be able to have permanent residency, you can spend that time in an under-earning job and stressed out, or you can
Yeah.
spend that time earning a comfortable salary,
Uh-huh.
confident that you'll meet the requirements for Canadian immigration,
Uh-huh.
and being able to live comfortably instead of under-earning and stressed out.
Exactly. Uh-huh. And you spoke a little bit about that if you had just gotten help at the time, you would have saved a lot of stress and you would have gotten into your career a lot quicker than you ended up doing it because you're doing a lot of DIY, doing what you could afford and taking things on your own.
Absolutely. I was taking it on my own. To be honest, I didn't have the finances and resources, but even when I had the finances and resources, because my first job made like this was 2011. My first job made 55,000. Within 18 months, I was at about 70,000. Um, and and then by the time I was like 25, so I started working at 21. By 22, 23, I was about 70,000. And by the time I was about 25, 26, I was interviewing for roles for 100,000. That was me taking a slow path because I could have went faster
Uh-huh.
if I had known the skills that I have now,
Uh-huh.
and I had moved outside of my company, because I stayed within the same company when I was doing that. And if I knew how to sell myself the way I knew now, I knew that switching companies was so beneficial to career growth. Unless you have like a stellar management team that really values you, and you know how to sell yourself, and so you're constantly negotiating your value, and they're giving you the opportunities for that growth, and like you are almost like a partner to the CEO and how they are, or the manager, and how you're approaching your growth. Those are companies where I recommend clients stay. I also recommend that they use those companies to have the time flexibility to build out other paths of money. So you want to have multiple streams of money coming in, because the thing that people are realizing with layoffs, even if you do really well in your job, if your company as a whole is not doing well, you
Mm-hmm.
could be laid off just because they don't have the money to pay you.
Yeah.
Right? Because as a company, not everybody is working and thinking like you are and trying to meet the company's needs and meet clients' needs. So because you have poor management who hasn't pulled together a good team, now teams of people are being laid off, and they may hold on to you. What I find is for clients who work well, who sell the way I teach them to, the companies will hold on to them for as long as they can.
Yeah.
But they can't give them the promotions that they should be getting. They
Exactly.
can't get all the
Mm-hmm.
opportunities. And you basically feel like, when am I going to be on that chopping block?
Yeah.
Right? When am I going to be the one? And when you can build out multiple streams of income, because you can solve multiple problems, and this is something that you've done, this is something that I've done, to be able to create more flexibility for ourselves. When you lose that job, you've got other employers reaching out to you, you've got other sources of income, and you can sleep well knowing that you have clarity on what the road ahead looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And you can avoid the risks and mistakes. You can make an informed decision supported by experts. Because I was afraid to do that initially. And then I realized, when I stopped going the traditional route, this is a big thing that I find people do. They'll want to go and pay for an MBA, or they'll pay for a master's degree because education is the path to success, right? And then they'll graduate and they'll be like, oh, but I thought if I did this, employers, that's what they thought I was missing. And I was like, you didn't need to go and do an MBA. I had a client who's also a good friend who went and did like $100,000 MBA, put herself in debt. And
Mm-hmm.
I told her before she did the MBA, I was like, I just want to make sure that I say this out loud. You do not need this MBA to get your next job.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, but I need this piece of paper because otherwise people will say, she's a nurse. And she's like, otherwise people will say I'm just a nurse and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not anything. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
nurses go and get these leadership roles all the time. You have had multiple people vouch for you and say that you're good for a leadership role. And she's like, but I don't know if I'll know everything. I was like, you can learn it on the job. And then she went and she spent $100,000 on her MBA. And then she got a promotion. I ended up coaching her how to sell herself because she wasn't getting the job interviews before I started coaching her, even after the MBA. And
Right.
right, because that's another thing.
Point.
I've had many clients go and say, I'm not going to pay for your cert. I'm not going to pay for a coach. I'm not going to pay for somebody to teach me how to sell myself. I'm going to go and get more education. And
Yeah.
they will pay like anywhere from
Way more
like
than a coach would cost.
way more. Like I'm talking about like 20 times more
Mm-hmm.
than a coach would cost.
Yep.
And then they'll come back to me and be like, I did that and it didn't work. So
Mm-hmm.
can we work together? And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
are you ready to like hear me out? And I don't come at it as a punitive way. I'm just like, are you actually ready to make some changes
Mm-hmm.
in how you're approaching things? Are you ready to be listened and be coachable?
Mm-hmm.
And I find that like this client, for example, she graduated, she did her MBA, she got a job, and then she reached out to one of her colleagues that had done the exact same MBA that she did. And he was about 5 years out of his MBA. And she's like, isn't it so great? Like, we got our MBAs, like, it's going to open so many doors. And he sat her down in a meeting and in a one-on-one chat. And he was like, your MBA is, you're not going to use anything that you learned in your MBA as you advance in your career. Cause he had taken a few levels. And he's like, the best thing that you can learn to do is how to sell yourself and understand how to solve problems, because most of the things that you're going to learn how to do, you wouldn't have learned in your MBA. You're going to learn on the job.
On the
Most of the
job.
things you learn on the job. And this is true in most cases, unless you're doing like, I would say, unless you're trying to work in investment banking, which is a very toxic long hour culture, or like consulting, which is also a very toxic long work hour culture where you kind of burn yourself out. um in a lot of, I shouldn't say like a lot of big five consulting, there's big four consulting, but outside of those consulting gigs, like there's a lot of really calm consulting that can be very nice where you're negotiating your work hours. And this supervisor told her, or it wasn't, yeah, it was her supervisor, he was about 5 years ahead of her, and he was like, I think you are disillusioned in what your MBA will provide.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to open doors for yourself, it's going to be by you learning on the job and you asking for opportunities and projects and finding the problems that exist and finding ways to fit yourself. And she started crying
Mm-hmm.
in front of him
Yeah.
because she had like, I mean, she had
It's
done her
convinced.
MBA. in the heart of COVID. Like she had done it while a nurse working at a hospital in the middle of COVID, which is stressful enough in healthcare as it is,
Yeah.
trying to navigate an MBA on top of that.
Mhm.
And I've had so many people who have went and pursued these expensive degrees when really what they needed was to learn how to solve problems that people care about. So I help clients do labor market research. I even had a client recently. He was laid off from a large tech company. He was making like 245,000. When I met him initially, he was making 80,000. No, when I met him initially, it was like his second week in Canada. And then he got a
Okay,
job
he's
that
an
made,
immigrant.
he was an immigrant from South America. His first job made 80,000. And he was like, okay. Within about 2 years, he was making 245,000.
Mhm.
And then he got laid off from his dream job because the company sold and it restructured. And now he has to find something new. And he's kind of like, okay, well, what do I do next? And there's this feeling of, well, how am I going to make this work? Why did I get laid off? Like there's this big like scarcity mindset that people are trying to figure out. And there's piece of like, oh, well, maybe I need more. He knows better than to think he just needs to get more education.
Yeah.
But he realized eventually he just needs to sell himself differently, and solve problems that people care about. But this, like, these jumps can happen, and it feels like something that's out of reach, because especially when you go to these for-profit private institutions, which is where we started this conversation, a lot of the people around you are struggling financially
Mhm.
because the schools aren't teaching you how to succeed. So you need to step outside of it to succeed.
Mhm. Mhm. And I feel like that brings us to this point now where we are figuring like, how do we actually help you guys who are in these situations, who was the me in 2024, right? Where I wasn't necessarily struggling, but I took what I got. I took what I got, and it was not the best decision for me. I left a lot of money on the table, a lot of money on the table. And in the end, it ended up being toxic and not valuable, not realizing my value and worth and all the sacrifice and all these wonderful things. And so with all these experiences and all the things that Jet spoke about and all the people that she has helped, we thought it's very fitting that Jet, who is one of my personal mentors as well, that we collaborate together now to help you guys figure out how you can build a life in Canada that's not just about survival, not about survival jobs, not about just doing it for the PR. Because after the PR, there is life that you have to live. After the PR, you have to figure out like, oh, I'm going to live, I'm going to have a house, I'm going to have children who are going to go to daycare, and you're going to realize what daycare costs. And then you want her to go to Montessori and all these wonderful things. And life exists after PR. So what is that life after PR? Are you trying to survive or are you trying to thrive? So Jen and I are partnering to work together to build a life and coaching program. So a life and career coaching program that is for the immigrant who is not just trying to come to Canada to survive, but to thrive. And that is our response to everything that we know that is going on, all the changes in immigration, all the problems that we know that you have, and how we're going to help you to fix it. There's this saying that I learned from a previous mentorship program that I did. It's called define, learn, do. So define what it is that you want, define the lifestyle that you want, define what pathway you want to be on, learn from somebody who has done it. We've done it, and then set about to do it, right? Get help, get the guidance, get the mentorship. Jet mentioned this herself, and I mean, after I met Jet, I was like, well, I wish I met you in 2014, right? But like Jet mentioned it herself, that if she had just decided to get help, she could have been so much further along than the DIY figure it out in literally, what was it, about 6 years for you to get to where you wanted. That could have probably been 3 years. Similar
Yes.
for me. And similarly for a lot of people who are right now kind of pumping out resumes, doing stuff that you want. What is a 1 year process for you could be cut in half or even a quarter if you just decide to get help. So we are here to help you. We're putting things together to help you, a coaching package, career coaching and life coaching, to help you guys to come to Canada and not just survive, but thrive. So you are going to see more information about that either on the screen or in a link below, depending on when you're watching this video. We look forward to serving you guys. I've had an amazing chat with you, Jet. It's always great when we get together. And I mean, I've known you for a long time. We've never physically met. This is post-COVID life, guys. You don't really need to know somebody like that. You just need to see them on a screen and you totally know them. But she has been my personal mentor. She has helped me a lot, helped me to grow. And I did exactly what I'm telling you guys to do. Define what you want, learn from somebody who's done it, learn from somebody who can teach you, and then set about to do it. And together we can do that. Together we can help you with our immigration. Me as an immigration coach, Jet as a career and life coach can come together and help you guys to make the strides that you're trying to make. And especially as a response to all these changes with international students and stuff, some people are choosing school as a pathway to Canada. It does not need to be school. You do not need to spend thousands of dollars to go to school. If you're finding that all these changes are affecting you in that way, there are other programs that will seek to, you need to find a job, not any old job. I know that some people are doing that. It doesn't need to be any old job. It can target what's Canada looking for? Who is Canada looking for? Do you fill those labor shortages and those needs and help Canada to fill the gaps that they're trying to fill with immigration anyway? It has been a pleasure, Jet. I appreciate you and the time. We've spent half a day together.
Yes. I just want to add one thing before we wrap up. I think it's really important that we're not just teaching people, we're teaching people about immigration processes. We're teaching people about how to build their life in Canada that they want. We're teaching them about how to build a career in Canada that gives them the money that they need to live the life that they want. But there's also a huge emotional component because it's hard. And we didn't touch on that much. There's a huge emotional component around like I had a client who came from a low income background. He was first generation to go to university. And when I helped him get like a 3 times his salary for his first interview, we went 40 to 120,000, his hand shook and he started crying in the interview. And that wasn't the first time that that's happened. And we teach people how to calm their nervous system, how to feel regulated so they can start pursuing a life that they think is unimaginable or outside of their reach. And calming down your body and allowing your mind, like if you're trying to do this work and your mind's going blank and you're feeling distracted, that's your body feeling nervous. And we talk about this, like you have done work in shadow work. I have done work around trauma and healing where I've worked with people with complex PTSD and with deep like trauma. Because when you immigrate from different countries, our countries, like as a world, we are going through a lot.
Yes.
And so as individuals, we are carrying some of that. So how do you step outside of that to build a life that you want? Yeah. And that's something that we definitely both incorporate a lot into our work, but we didn't talk about a lot today.
No. Whereas there's going to be more time to talk together. But one thing we're going to plant inside your mind is to help you to believe, right? To believe that you can get that salary, believe that you can come to Canada and not just do anything. We're going to teach you that as part of the coaching as well. So we look forward to rolling that out to you. If it's not out yet, based on when you're watching this, everything is time-based. I know I'm recording this, it's January still, but we appreciate you guys for the time that you spend watching. Hit the like button if this was helpful for you. Go back and watch all of the episodes, binge watch them, take notes, guys, and apply these principles to your process. And click the link or whatever is on the screen to become part of our coaching program or to get some more information. Thank you, Jet. Happy Tuesday. See you soon virtually. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next video. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for having me, Christina. I really appreciate it.